get ready to push past me on action and action.
For as long as movies have existed, audiences have been fascinated by killers. Not just villains or criminals, but serial killers, psychopaths, and the kind of characters who make us deeply uncomfortable. From masked slashers in films like Halloween, to chilling real-life crime stories like Zodiac, or extremely wicked, shockingly evil and vile. These stories remain hugely popular, which raises an uncomfortable question: does enjoying movies about killers say something bad about us?
I'm a huge true crime junkie. My boyfriend and I watch Dateline almost every night.
Psychologists say the answer is probably no. In fact, there are several well-documented reasons why people are drawn to these stories. One explanation is what researchers call safe fear. Just like roller coasters or haunted houses, scary films allow us to experience intense emotions without real danger. Our brains respond to suspense and threat by releasing adrenaline, increasing heart rate and alertness. But because we know we're safe on the couch or in the cinema, the experience can actually be enjoyable. Another factor is simple curiosity. Humans are deeply interested in unusual or extreme behavior. Serial killers represent the far edge of human psychology, and stories about them tap into a natural desire to understand how such people think.
I think a serial killer is, I don't think there's anyone here, anyone watching, who doesn't have violence in them. You know, who doesn't maybe have violent dreams or violent thoughts. Then there's a certain number of people who actually fight, you know, who have fought or continue to fight. You know, so it's like different ends of a spectrum, you know. A serial killer is just the most extreme end of a spectrum that we're all on. We're all on that line somewhere.
But there is an important distinction between fictional killers and real ones. In purely fictional horror films, like the masked murderers in Friday the 13th, Halloween, or Happy Death Day, the violence is often stylized and exaggerated. These killers function almost like modern myths or monsters. Because the characters are entirely fictional, audiences rarely feel much moral conflict while watching, although some filmmakers do feel a responsibility toward their viewers.
One of the things we do with our movies, and we did with Happy Death Day, is before they're finished, you screen them with an audience and you watch the movie with an audience, and you can feel if you've pushed it too far, if the scare becomes gross or the laugh doesn't feel right. You can really feel it in the audience, and the fun thing about making movies is you can go back and you can make changes until it doesn't feel that way anymore. Or you can consciously decide to do it, but at least you know what you're getting into before it comes out.
True crime stories are different. When a movie portrays a real killer, such as the infamous Zodiac case depicted in Zodiac, the story's tied to real victims and real suffering. That raises ethical questions about whether these stories educate audiences about history and criminal psychology, or whether they risk turning real tragedies into entertainment. Another psychological aspect is that the case shown in Zodiac remains open to this day.
I think it's been very hard for audiences to deal with that. I mean, in America in particular, I think audiences are desperate to have things resolved, to know, to have an answer, you know? And this movie begs the question, what is a life sort of just living in questions? And is it possible to? My character, Robert Graysmith, finds it impossible and so destroys his life in the process. And I think it's a huge warning sign to audiences and to America and to the world that this need for an answer, this need for something known when so much is unknown, is destructive.
Interestingly, despite this discomfort, true crime content has become one of the most popular genres in film, television, and podcasts. Researchers believe part of the appeal is that these stories help people process fear and danger in a controlled way. By understanding how crimes happen, audiences feel better prepared to recognize threats in the real world. In other words, watching movies about killers doesn't necessarily mean we admire them. Often the fascination comes from the opposite impulse, a desire to understand evil, confront fear, and ultimately see justice or order restored. So, enjoying these films probably doesn't make us bad people, but it does reveal something important about human nature. We're both terrified of darkness and endlessly curious about it.